In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at lordosis and walking. Now, a lot of people have the right stretches, they sometimes know the right exercises, but what can we be doing with regards to our walking to be able to improve our lordosis or just be able to improve our posture in general? Well, what we're going to do, we're going to look at three parts. We're going to look at the standing posture, we're then going to be looking at a suitcase carry, and then we're going to look at a rack carry. We're going to be talking about some specific principles of lordosis as we go through, but they're the three parts that we're going to work through. In part number one, we're going to be looking at the standing posture, or in some respects, the walking posture as well. Now, if I turn to the side, what we want is a straight line from, let's just say, our ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, all the way up. Now, as we know with lordosis, it's generally the bum sticking out. We've got an exaggerated curve here, and the abdominals are starting to protrude here. So the first thing that we need to do is manage all of that. So we need to get that back into position. So we need to pull the abdominals, squeeze the glutes, come up tall. So make sure we're coming out of that position. Now, that can be a challenge in and of itself. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily going on to the next two parts if you haven't got a degree of competency during this part. So the first part is just to be able to stand up from this sort of lordotic position, pull the abdominals in, squeeze of the glutes, and be up in this position. So making sure that when you squeeze your glutes, you're not tipping yourself forward like so. So again, even with abdominals tight, we want to be able to be upright. So we've got that position. What we can then start to do is add the walk in. So what we're not doing is, as soon as we come up into this position, so we come up into that good standing position, but then as soon as we start walking, we go back into that lordotic position. Because again, that's sort of defeating the object of what we're trying to achieve. So the first thing is, number one, be able to get into that standing position. So we've got that nice sort of neutral inward curve of the spine. We're not hyperlordotic. So we get into that position, heads upright. What we then need to be focusing on is moving from that position and then maintaining it as we walk as well. If we can do that, then it's a good time to then move on to part number two, which is now introducing a weight which is going to challenge us, which is why I said if you can't sort of do this first bit, then the second bit is going to be even harder because we're now introducing a load or a weight. In part number two, we're going to be looking at the suitcase carry. So the suitcase carry, I'm going to be using a kettlebell here, and this is a 12 kilo kettlebell. You don't have to use a kettlebell, you don't have to use a 12 kilo one. You could use a dumbbell or a bag or anything that is adequate for as a weight. So first two things that we focused on were standing posture and then taking that good standing posture into walking. So what we then want to be able to do is, from that is a suitcase carry, just like a suitcase, you have it in one hand. Now, what this is going to do is, again, we want to be tummy tight, spine, chest and head up. Now, what this is going to do is, as soon as I lift this leg, it's making all of this work so I don't collapse the other way. As soon as I put my foot down, you can feel the muscle tension still there, but it does reduce a little bit. Lift it up. Again, it's trying to stop me from going over to the side. So I use this and I have it out to the side. So I, again, hold this position and then I do exactly the same and I aim to do the walking. Now, before you get to that point, you can start, as I just did, by just starting with a static march. You can just bring your foot up, hold, change sides. So there will be a weight shift, that's normal. So if you watch me from the front, there will be a weight shift because I'm holding a weight, so that's normal. But what we're looking for, again, is holding the position of the spine, so we're not going back into that lordotic position. So we're holding that position. What we can then do is obviously swap over sides, and it's just a case of doing exactly the same from the other side. So all we're focusing on is just keeping abdominals, or keeping the spine in position by using the abdominals and using the glutes. So that is using a suitcase carry. Once you've got that marching part to it, you can then move into this normal walking element to it. So all we're trying to learn at the moment is just getting the muscles engaged, and then we can start doing it whilst we're walking, and then obviously with a weight, and we're starting to challenge ourselves a little bit more. So that is the walking using the suitcase carry, what we're now going to do is we'll go into a rack carry. In part number 3, the position of the carry is slightly different. So where we were down by the side, what we're now going to do is come up into the top. Now this can be the most challenging position. And the reason for that is because the weight sits on top of you, and what you want to do is you want to go back into that position. So what we need to be able to do is refrain from that lordotic position, and then we need to refrain from this position and hold ourselves centered in the middle. But all of this has been a precursor to working up to this point. So as I've mentioned all the way through, start with just the standing posture and then start using it whilst your legs are moving and arms are moving during walking. Introduce a weight, go up into marching and then into walking using the suitcase carry. And then finally, we would come into a position where a weight would sit in this sort of position, and then what most people would do is they would let that weight sit on top of them. So they'd lean back, so you can see the center of the weight goes right down through my hip because I'm bringing my hip underneath the weight. So essentially my weight is sat on top of my hip. Now what I want to be able to do is this position. Again, I'm maintaining the position of the spine using the abdominals, using the glutes, but now because the weight's up here, I'm using much more of my upper body. So I'm not just letting the weight sit on my upper body and my hip, I'm letting it sit and use the strength of my arm, engaging all the muscles down the side here, and then again, I could go into a march just to get myself used to doing it, making sure the abdominals are engaged. Again, there will be a weight shift, that's absolutely fine, and then I can move into walking. Obviously, we would do it on one side, and then we would do it on the other, and then finally what we would do is work or move into a normal walking posture. So those are the sort of 4 or 5, maybe even 6 progressions into walking. So we start, as I've mentioned, with the standing posture. Make sure you get that right. Then we move into walking, so without any weight. So it's standing, then into walking. Then we introduce a weight and we come into a suitcase carry using a march and then into a walk. Again, maintaining the position of the spine by using the abdominals and the glutes. Then in the third part, we go into a carrying like a rack. So instead of letting it sit on our body and through our hip, we come forward and we use the upper body, the arm, to hold it in position. And then we move into a march and then finally into walking again. So that is one way to help manage lordosis with walking.